Recording in
All right, greetings and welcome to my house, to our podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Doran. We were going to do this yesterday. Your wife's flight got delayed or something. We wanted to go 2 months out from Selection Sunday, but what's one day, right? We're 58 days out from the big day. Thought we would just go right through the whiteboard. This is my whiteboard. You might argue with me on a few of these. This is basically what this whole podcast is going to be, but we'll go league by league and kind of get a sense of where each conference is at right now. With 2 months to go, I don't know if it's Friday, January 17th, in case you happen to stumble upon this another day. Um, it's 9 o'clock ish. We don't know any results from yet. Providence and Villanova are tied right now. You can guess when we're actually recording, but we'll start in the ACC with Duke sitting pretty. Do you have Duke at 2 or 3 overall right now?
Three overall. Had them at two overall before Iowa State beat Kansas. And I think Duke, to me, I still think Duke is the most likely national champion of any team. We've talked about that for a while. Still believe that. Even though I believe that, I think Iowa State's resume at this point is just, it's pushed so far past Duke that I think you have to give them the slight edge, even though I personally believe Duke's the better team.
I definitely would if they're on a neutral court. Duke's probably favored by 5, 6. I mean, it wouldn't be. It's not a toss up, but resume wise, yeah, I also have Iowa State. I already had Iowa State ahead of Duke, and then after Iowa State beat Kansas, even though it was at home, you got that Hilton Magic, whatever. That was better than anything Duke's done in the past couple of weeks. So I think that if they weren't already there, it was kind of a razor thin difference 4 or 5 days ago. Now I think the Cyclones are ahead, but whatever. Duke's a 1 seed. Duke's going to be in the tournament.
In like worst
Yeah,
case scenario, two seed, but even I don't see that. Like I think
yeah,
Duke is going to be a one seed. I'm very confident they're going to be a one seed. I just don't think they have enough losses to fall off the one line. Like, do I think Duke could lose more than two games? Not realistically, no. Like I just don't. So like from this point forward, I don't see how Duke comes off the one line.
yeah. They already played at Louisville, won that game by I believe 11, and that's in theory, based on resumes, the toughest game they could play. Even the game at North Carolina wouldn't theoretically be that tough. But what is that? Certainly in for now. I can't read my writing backwards on the screen. But Louisville, UNC, and Clemson. Where do you have Louisville right now? I think I have them up to a 6 seed right now.
Yeah, I have Louisville as a seven seed, but I think all three of those, Louisville, UNC, Clemson, they're certainly in for now. I think Louisville's I think Louisville belongs in a different group than those other two. I think Louisville's
We
going to
need
be in
we
the
need more
tournament.
buckets.
I think, yeah, if we had more buckets, I would say there's a difference between Louisville
Yeah.
topping that and then UNC and Clemson. Clemson's got a big one against Pitt because I'm not super confident in the loser of that game getting in. Do I think the loser probably gets in? Probably, but it's going to be close. I think that will be probably one of the most important games of the weekend
Yeah.
because the trajectory on those two teams changes dramatically based on a win or a loss.
Yeah. Pittsburgh was previously in the certainly in for now, but now they've gotten very bubbly after their what close loss at Florida State, which did move Florida State into the worth discussing category. We can get into them in a little bit, but where do you have Pitt now? I think I have them as a 10 seed.
I have them as a 10 seed. They're 1-5 against quad one. And three of their four quad one games that they have remaining, they're going to be road underdogs. So it could get a little spicy for Pitt. If they're 1-5 now and you think they lose three of those four, which is a
Yeah.
reasonable assertion, that's not looking so great. Certainly not insurmountable to have a Q1 record like that, but it's very unlikely that a team gets a tournament bid with a Q1 record
Yeah.
like that.
You want those opportunities, but you also don't want those opportunities sometimes. Pitt's interesting because they did a lot more in non-conference play than they have. Like we've been raking Pitt over the coals for half a decade for what they didn't do in non-conference play. Now this year they won at Ohio State. They beat Westford. They pummeled West Virginia, and then they had a third pretty good win. I'm forgetting who it was right now, but they have three quad one or quad two non-conference wins. Like they entered ACC play in great shape. Now that they're on a 3 game losing streak, though, punctuated by probably their worst loss of the season to Florida State. It is getting really questionable for the Panthers, but I believe in them more than I believe in SMU or Wake Forest, I would say.
Well, they literally had a little fight in them after the Florida State game. How does that translate this weekend? Is that the sort of, okay, we've pulled together, we're motivated, let's play as a team? Or is that like the beginning of an unraveling?
Yeah. Do you think SMU has a realistic chance? Because I forget one of the many bracketologist people that we follow said something about, with SMU scraping by with that road win over Virginia, like, oh, all of a sudden they've gotten interesting. Like they kind of blew their two chances.
Yeah, I look at SMU as a team who, on paper,
Yeah.
looks like they should be in consideration, but nothing really stands out. And unfortunately, when you get towards that bubble, the committee's looking for who stands out in any positive way. And I just don't see anything about SMU that stands out currently, and I certainly don't think they're going to add to that. So,
Yeah.
do they belong to be on the bubble? Absolutely. They're a bubble team. Do I think they're going to make the tournament? No. I see a big gap between Pitt and SMU, same way I see a big gap between Louisville, UNC, and Clemson.
Okay. SMU is, as you were saying, on paper, 45th net, 46th resume average, 53rd predictives. Generally, that's good, but they're 0-3 in quad one. They have a quad two loss, and like you're saying, they're not going to get opportunity. I think they don't play Duke or Carolina again, at least until the ACC tournament. And their games against Clemson and Pitt are both at home. I forget when or where they play Louisville. Maybe that will be a big opportunity for them, but they don't really have chances the rest of the way. So I don't see the Mustangs getting in.
And like usually we don't deep dive that much into a loss. Like a loss is a loss for the most part. But when you have such limited opportunities like SMU, the fact that they were completely non-competitive
Yeah.
at home against Duke, I think hurts. Like Duke's a very good basketball team, but they should have put up a little bit of a fight.
Yeah.
So I think without some of those quality wins and then not being competitive, because we have seen in the past, there have been years the committees have been like, man, I know they lost that neutral court game, but it was against the number one overall seed and it was really close, really competitive, and they've given a little bit of a break that way. I just don't see anything for SMU that would give them a break.
Yeah. Between Wake Forest and Florida State, who do you think has a more realistic shot?
It's an
Maybe
interesting one, actually.
resume wise, not who do you believe in
I
more,
mean,
right? 'Cause I think
resume
Wake,
wise, it's Wake.
yeah,
Like, without a doubt, Wake has the better resume today. But I think it's an interesting question for who do you believe in a little bit more. Like looking at Wake Forest moving forward, they're projected favorites in only five remaining games.
are you serious?
Yeah, that's not great. And then Florida State has only three quad one games left. So Florida State has a lot of ground to make up without a lot of opportunities. One of those is at Duke, so you can pretty much pencil that in for a loss. So they basically have to go 2-0 in those other games, or they're completely out of the discussion.
Yeah.
I think are both teams worth discussing? And is Wake Forest on the bubble? Wake's on the bubble. Florida State's worth discussing. I don't like the odds for either of them.
Uh, that's fair. I did when we did the previous pod and we were saying who's the furthest gone do you think could get in? I did say Wake Forest, and even at that, I don't fully believe it. That was more so just their resume metrics, which are solid, but
I mean, the one thing Wake has going for them is their predictive metrics are really poor.
yeah.
But do I still see they got
Yeah,
some
they still
talent?
still Hunter
Sometimes they
Dallas, still Omaha Billy.
right, like it's it could come together, and they have the resume metrics that if it comes together, they could do it.
Yeah. All right. Big 12, Iowa State, Kansas, and Houston sitting pretty. Where do you have Houston now? Because I'm never comfortable with where to put Houston.
I had been holding them as a 5 seed for pretty much the entire year. Now they've moved up to a 4 seed, not necessarily because they've done anything spectacular, still no quad one wins, but looking at all the other options, I can't have Memphis over them. I can't have
Yeah.
Gonzaga can't be over them. Like
Yeah.
there's just dwindling options on who can be there. And then Houston is really, really good. Like let's cut to the chase. If you're the tournament committee, do you feel comfortable putting Houston as a 5 or a 6 seed just because they don't have like I wouldn't. I would say they're better than the teams behind them. Let's just face reality and put them where they deserve to be.
That would be terribly cruel to whoever that 3 seed is if Houston is a 6 seed. But yeah, 0-3 against quad one, like we assume they will eventually pick up several quad one wins, but they're not there yet. Even without a quad one win, though, their resume average is like 25th. Like it's crazy what they've been able to do, even excluding the fact that they're just beating the hell out of teams that they should be able to beat. Arizona is all the way up to 12th in the net. Arizona was dead before Big 12 play started. They were 6-5 overall. Their best win was Davidson on a neutral court. I don't even remember what their second best win was, probably like a home game against Elon or something ridiculous. And now just they've Big 12 play started and they've been awesome. I think I have them up to a 6 seed now. They're definitely they're definitely in right now, along with Baylor and West Virginia. Although Baylor, man, when they don't show up, they do not show up.
That's been one of my bigger misses this year, I'd say, is I thought Baylor was going to be an outside national title contender, and they haven't been anything close to that. Do they have a lot of talent? Yes, but we've talked about Baylor a couple times. They're a hard seed.
Yeah.
They've got that win over St. John's on a neutral court, but that could have gone the other way. And what does their resume look like if they
Yeah.
didn't get it? But they got destroyed by Gonzaga, and at first we saw that and thought, man, Gonzaga might just be the national champion this year. And now we're like, ugh, that Gonzaga's not doing so hot in their top up games, and they absolutely blew Baylor off the floor. So I think Baylor's solidly in the tournament. I would say of all of those teams, the one that I would be the most concerned about is probably West Virginia, but you could argue Baylor. I mean, West Virginia, I think their three good wins that they have are so good. At Kansas, neutral court against Arizona, and then neutral court against Gonzaga.
Yeah.
I just really can't see them being left out if they're anywhere close to that bubble. Baylor doesn't have quite so many quality wins stacked up. So if things go south for Baylor, I don't know that they'll have the leeway that West Virginia has already built up. But I feel like Arizona's maybe even the Big 12 champion.
Yeah.
Do I think they'll win it? No. Do I think they're an absolute championship contender? Totally.
Baylor is sneakily a Indiana with one more quality win. Like both of those teams, when they lose by like 20 plus. Baylor has two quad one wins. Indiana just has the one. If Baylor, like you said, if they didn't get that St. John's win, man, they're not even in the tournament probably right now. They're at least probably a 10 seed at best. But the metrics look good. They have a couple of quality wins, and we think they're better than their resume shows thus far. Speaking of better than the resume shows thus far, Texas Tech and Cincinnati. Texas Tech, do they have one quad one win now? Oh, they have two, but they have two quad two losses. Cincinnati has no quad one wins. Of that group, I feel like UCF is probably the best, but their predictives say they are not.
To UCF's credit, they've gotten some quality wins when they've had opportunities.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just going on the road and beating Texas Tech, which is absolutely the sort of win that could put them over the hump if they stay competitive in Big 12 play. Like that is a big win. But also beating Texas A&M, they went on the road, beat Arizona State. Like UCF has a solid profile
Yeah.
as it stands today. I actually don't even have them in Dayton as the first four team right now. I have them above that because I just think their wins are so good. But moving forward, don't really like UCF's chances. Cincinnati's an interesting one. Really like Texas Tech's chances. I'll say
Yeah,
that. I think if the tournament was today, I think they're in and they're just going to grow. Like I think Texas Tech's making the tournament.
I agree.
Cincinnati is that's where it starts to get fun in the Big 12 to me. Because you look at them, they've got no quad three and four losses. So as much as they've disappointed,
Nobody in the Big 12 has a quad three or four loss. Well,
that is a
outside
great stat.
of the ones that were actually considered, like Oklahoma State, Kansas State might, but of those 11 teams, none of them have a quad three or quad four loss.
And that matters. Like the
Yeah,
committee has shown that absolutely matters. They're 3-1 versus quad two. So despite their struggles against quad one, they still have actually a pretty decent set of wins to go off of. They only have two remaining games versus the quartet of Houston, Iowa State, Kansas, and Arizona. Only two remaining games against those four.
that's wild.
Yeah. So on the one hand, we're looking at Cincinnati being like, well, they already lost at home to Arizona. They already lost at home to Kansas, but they're off their plate now. Like they only have to deal with Houston once, Iowa State once, and that's it. I think the path is there for Cincinnati to dig themselves out of the hole that they've gotten themselves into. Offense doesn't look great,
Yeah, can they score 50 points against anyone is the question with Cincinnati.
but their defense can hold teams under 50 points. So, it's the yin and the yang of Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's probably barely going to get into the tournament. I think it's going to be really close. BYU over on the worth discussing side, that's the other team I think is going to be really intriguing in the Big 12 down the road.
I do think with Cincinnati, the question of intent to schedule, right? They didn't schedule a single non-conference game against a preseason AP top 25 team. I believe they were the only ranked team that did not schedule a single game against another ranked team. Like they just made no effort. And that's their thing. They do it like every year, it seems. Will it bite them? I think if they're anywhere close to the bubble, I think that costs them in the end that they just didn't even try.
What I think Cincinnati is lucky on, to the point about Houston and Iowa State and Kansas and Arizona, they have quad one opportunity. They actually have a lot of quad one opportunities, but they're kind of like, what I've referred to in the past as those Big Ten
Yeah.
quad one
Like
opportunities,
at
right?
at net 74 UCF.
Yes, these are, it's like, oh, we get BYU at home, right? Okay, like I think I can handle that game.
Hmm.
They've got the opportunity to look really good on paper, and their predictive metrics are already good.
Yeah.
So if they win enough games, their predictive metrics are going to be pretty good. Their quad splits would be pretty good because they don't have a bad loss.
Right.
Like it just could all come together by just doing kind of what we expect Cincinnati to do.
Yeah. Last note on that trio, resume metrics average, UCF 29, Texas Tech 49, Cincinnati 60. So kind of speaking to where we're saying, like right now, resume wise, probably UCF is the best of the bunch, but predictives suggest they won't be. And then the last two, Arizona State and BYU, I don't have either of them particularly close to my field right now. Could add Utah on there as well as worth discussing, although they don't have a quad one win yet. They're getting close. They're what I consider for the worth discussing is if you go on the road and beat the best team in your conference, are you then probably in the at least in the conversation for a spot in the field? And I think if Utah were to go on the field or go on the road and beat Houston, all of a sudden they're in the mix. Certainly Arizona State and BYU are in the same boat. Um, Sounded like you had something queued up for BYU though, so go
I
for
do have something queued up for BYU,
it.
of course. But really, like we will know very quickly whether BYU is a legitimate tournament contender or not because they are favorites in their next 5 games.
Okay.
And so they need to hold serve there because they're underdogs in 5 of the next 6 after that. So it's really very clear for BYU. Handle your business now
Yeah.
because if you don't, those games later aren't going to matter.
Yeah.
So I'm really intrigued by BYU and Cincinnati. I think one of the two will probably make it. And I think it's probably going to be Cincinnati. But again, BYU's that kind of team. Like, don't sleep on the chance they could pick up a quad two home win over Utah and then a quad one road win over Utah. Like, are those big changing your resume sort of games? No, but you add enough of them together,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you got something.
Yeah. It's better to be 2-3 against quad one, even if they are questionable, than 0-3 against quad one. Um, Moving on to the Big East, this should be much quicker because there's not a whole lot to talk about in the Big East. Marquette and UConn definitely solidly in, although UConn is a little bit closer to the certainly in for now than sitting pretty. Their metrics aren't great, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt because they're the twice reigning champion. And then St. John's certainly in for now. Those are the three that pretty much everyone has been assuming will be in. Creighton, what they won at Butler recently and then picked up a home win over Providence. I think right now they would be in with even a little bit of room to spare, probably just right above Dayton. Do you think Creighton ultimately gets in?
I think there's going to be 4 from the Big East, and I
Yep.
think Creighton's the 4th. Villanova's the team you have over here on the worth discussing side with Georgetown and Xavier. That's the one that I think we should talk about because Villanova is where it gets
Take
interesting.
it away, Villanova.
They've got 3 games remaining against Marquette and UConn,
Yep.
and then they've got Creighton and St. John's both at home.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a good path.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of opportunity for marquee wins over the 2 best teams in the conference, but also, yeah, if you beat Creighton and St. John's at home, it's not going to blow anybody's socks off, but that's really a very solid win. And when the committee looks, they're not just looking at the quads, they're also saying, oh, you beat a tournament team given an opportunity.
Yep.
You beat a tournament team given an opportunity. Like if they just add the Creighton and St. John's home wins to maybe taking even one of those 3 against Marquette and UConn might be enough because they've already got a UConn win in the bag.
Yep.
Could be something for Villanova.
So I tweeted this earlier. Hypothetical scenario. If Villanova, so they have the road games against Marquette and Connecticut. If they lose those two and win everything else, are they in? Because I'm not convinced they are. Even at 15-5 in Big East play, even with only 9 total losses, they have that horrible loss to Columbia. They have what has become a god-awful loss to Villanova. They lost to themselves, to Virginia in Baltimore. They lost at St. Joseph's. Like they did nothing the first couple weeks of the season, and then if they don't get any of the road wins, right? If they didn't win at Creighton. If they didn't win at St. John's, if they lose the five best road games that they could possibly get in Big East play, I don't know if just holding serve at home will be enough. That's what Rutgers did, right? 2, 3 years ago. They got enough quad one wins, pretty much all of them at home, and then they had the worst resume metrics average to get in at 57 and a half. But Villanova right now is at like 90 in the resume metrics. Like they have to really, really work their way up. And if you don't win that game at Marquette and you don't win that game at Connecticut, I don't know if they get into the top 60 in the resume metrics.
What could be interesting for Villanova, as opposed to really pretty much any other conference that's in college basketball now, is due to the size of the Big East, they still have that round robin.
Right.
If they're 15-5, then all of a sudden I turn my attention to Creighton
Yeah.
and think maybe they should be getting in over Creighton.
Yeah.
If Creighton doesn't beat them out in the Big East standings, maybe Villanova's the team. And it could be very much if they're in that scenario, what do you do in the quarterfinals of the Big East tournament? Do you get to the semis? If you get to the semis, maybe it's enough. If you don't, maybe it's not enough.
Do you think we'll go conspiracy theory here for a moment? If it is close, will the fact that the Big East got jobbed
I
last
absolutely
year?
think it's going to
Yeah,
play a role.
I do too.
I think the two things that I've really been paying attention to this year is one, Big East. If they have a chance to not job over a Big East team, I think they're going to take it
Yeah.
because everybody hated the fact that Big East got three teams last year. It felt bad to everyone, and the Big East was pissed about it for good reason.
Particularly, they felt bad.
But even everybody else thought, man, this just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Like with those, you had St. John's, Seton Hall, Providence, all NCAA tournament caliber resumes, and none of them got in. Like if it's close, I think they're going to get the benefit. The other team that I think is going to get a benefit is if we've got another team like Indiana State this year. I think the committee wanted to put Indiana State in. If you looked at who was left out of the tournament,
Yeah.
I think they would have been in there, but 4 or 5 bid stealers. So I think that's another area that the committee's probably got, and it's just natural, right? Maybe a little bit of guilt about we wanted to put in a really stellar mid-major and we just couldn't because there weren't enough bids. If there's enough bids this year, I think they're looking to put in a Big East team, and I think they're looking to put in a mid-major.
All right. We'll jump the Big Ten and the SEC. Conveniently, those are on the back of my sheet, so now I don't have to turn it over. But since you brought up the mid majors, let's just go straight down there. The best of the rest, as I have it labeled here. I did have Memphis as sitting pretty. Then they lost to Temple. Who knows if Memphis is going to do Memphis things again and just collapse for the next 2 months? They moved to certainly in for now, along with Gonzaga, which lost to Oregon State last night, Utah State, and San Diego State. Which of those four teams are you most confident in getting into the tournament? And is it the same team that you're most confident in picking to the Sweet 16?
Yes.
Okay.
I am most confident Gonzaga is going to get
Okay.
into the tournament. Even though I actually really like Utah State, but that's for me, it just comes down to does anyone think Gonzaga is not one of the best 68? Like, I just, when push comes to shove and they look at Gonzaga, they're like, they've already won multiple Q1 games.
Yeah.
They've already banked those, and they're almost certainly going to get some more in the WCC. In fact, they've got a great schedule for that.
Yeah.
It's that, oh, you play Washington State, those sorts of games.
I was looking at that today for St. Mary's. Like they still have 10 games against Santa Clara, San Francisco, Washington State, Oregon State, Gonzaga. Like it's going to be just a record for Q1 games in WCC this year.
I think it's just inevitable. They're going to pick up enough Q1 wins that they're going to make the tournament. They're their best chance at a Sweet 16. But of these four, the team that really catches my attention is Utah State. They obviously picked up the loss to UNLV the other day. But if you look what they've done, they're 4-0 against Quad 1.
Yeah.
They've been dominant against Quad 1 and Quad 2. Predictive metrics aren't great, but you look at the Mountain West and just think, they're probably going to win the Mountain West.
Yeah.
And even if they're second or third, they've done so well to this point that how are you going to deny them? I think Utah State, to me, has a better chance of making the tournament than Memphis.
I agree with that entirely. They're definitely losses that Utah State takes most likely will not be as bad as the losses Memphis could take. And they do have similar resume metrics. They have similar predictive metrics. Yeah, I do think Utah State would probably is more likely than Memphis. As you put me on the spot, I might even have Utah State ahead of Memphis now. I haven't done an updated seed list since the loss to Temple, but I could see that for sure. Moving on to the bubble, St. Mary's, New Mexico, Drake, Bradley, UC Irvine, excluding the whoever you have as the auto bid for Drake Bradley. Which of the, I guess you have UCI as the projected Big West champ as well, but St. Mary's, do you have in? New Mexico, you have out.
I actually have both of those teams in.
Okay.
I have New Mexico as my final team in the bracket
Okay.
right now. And obviously, they took a tough loss the other day too to San Jose State. But what New Mexico has is a really good record in quad one and quad two. Unfortunately for them, that UCLA win
Yeah.
is not looking so good anymore. But still, when you're that dominant against quad one and quad two, I think when you're right on that bubble, you tend to get the benefit, kind of like you mentioned with Rutgers and
hmm
Texas A&M last year, right? Like if you're really good in quad one and you post these good records up there, they're going to allow a lot of mistakes
Yeah.
like New Mexico State, and still let you into the field. Again, my last team in right now, so I'm not saying they have room to spare. But when you compare them to a team like Iowa, who doesn't have a quad one win,
Yeah.
it starts to stand out.
Do you think that the Valley will be a two bid league? Do you think there's any chance both Drake and Bradley get in?
I think there's a chance it happens. I don't expect it to happen.
Same. I hope Drake gets in. I love Drake. They're fun to watch.
Well,
As
Drake is
slow
the
paced as
Indiana
they
State
are.
of this year if that goes that way, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think a big deal was figuring out which one of, and actually, UC Irvine reminds me of it too, right? We needed to figure out which of Drake and Bradley is the one that's more likely to be the at-large
Right. You want
contender.
you want the worst team to win the tournament.
Exactly. And then I think UC Irvine picking up that win over UC San Diego.
Yep.
Now the Big West is wanting Irvine to win that second game and then San Diego
Yep.
to win the tournament final.
Of those other eight in this bottom right corner, I don't know if you can even see any of it, frankly. I don't know what the glare is like. But Dayton, Boise State, Washington State, North Texas, UC San Diego, VCU, Oregon State, and the Bonnies. Which of those eight do you think gets in? Well, you probably have Dayton as your A10 auto bid, but uh, Dayton, VCU, Bonnies, St. Louis is kind of pretty good too. Could the A10 be a two bid league?
I think it could.
Yeah.
For Dayton that you mentioned, because obviously they stacked those wins against UConn and Marquette.
Yep.
But the team that I moved in as the auto bid is VCU.
Okay. Well, they did just smoke St. Louis, so that's fair.
And I think they're the best team in the
Yeah.
A10. And VCU doesn't really have the opportunity to improve the resume much,
And it's not good now.
but they have the opportunity to just pile up wins. And so, kind of going back to that Indiana State example, I think VCU, the A10, we don't really view as like a traditional mid-major league, but they are this year. They don't have, it's not going to be like a five-bid league. I think if one team, because look at it, right? Like we've got Dayton, we've got St. Bonaventure, we've got VCU. They have good teams. They don't have great teams.
Yeah.
If one team runs away with the league, even if they're not stringing together a bunch of quality wins, I think that could be enough. And I think part of it because it could be because it's the first year with wins above bubble being a part of that selection committee criteria. And I think it might be a good opportunity for the selection committee to say, hey, it's not just about the quads. Look at VCU. They didn't do that, but what they did is they had a great wins above bubble ranking by running through the A10.
Yeah.
And I think that could be what gets them a bid.
Sound logic. Anything else on this tier you want to go through before we go back to the Big Ten?
I would just briefly mention that I think Boise State's also a good candidate for
Yeah.
making a late run. Right now, nothing there. When it gets Clemson, that's about it. But they could get there. Starts with an opportunity at New Mexico.
All right. Big Ten, this is where we start getting into a whole lot of teams. Sitting pretty, Oregon, Purdue, Illinois, Michigan, Michigan State. Do you have any objection? I could just shuffle those five on it. At this point, Oregon at what 8-1 against quad one, like they're clearly at the top resume wise. I don't really believe in Oregon. I mean, you're always texting me about how Oregon's the luckiest team in the world,
And
but
I totally believe that. I think they are the luckiest team in college basketball.
so of those five, I do think a big discussion on the Big Ten. This really has nothing to do with bracketology, but do you think the Big Ten has a Final Four legitimate threat? And is it one of those five teams?
I'll put it this way. They have so many teams that are going to be 4 seeds or thereabouts that they have a good shot of landing a Final Four team.
That's not what I'm asking.
But do I
If you
think they
had to
have
pick
a Final
one,
Four team? No, I don't. And that includes Illinois. You look at their efficiency metrics, you think national championship caliber team. I don't believe in Illinois. I don't believe in any of those teams. I know Purdue, very solid all the way around. I don't believe in them either. I just literally I look at that grouping and I think I don't believe in any of them as a Final Four team.
I mean, this Purdue team in particular feels ripe for the picking for a 13 over 4 upset. And we've seen Purdue do that like 5 times. I could definitely see them losing to a North Texas again.
Well, in Michigan, right? Like Michigan looks great on paper, and then all of a sudden you look at their Q2 record and you're like, why do
Yeah.
they keep losing to the
4 Q2 losses.
right? That just something's a little off there.
Yeah. Yeah, they're Michigan's interesting. Like their style of play with Golden and Wolf, like the 2 7-footers, it either works really well or just falls apart in a hurry. So yeah, they'll be an interesting matchup team for sure. I believe in Illinois. I don't think I'll be picking them to the Final Four. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they get there. Part of that is like they've been so good already, and they're relying pretty heavily on 3 freshmen. I'm not worried about the loss to USC since Jakashonis wasn't in that game. I mean, obviously it counts against them for resume wise, but I think that's nothing to really worry about. The next two, Wisconsin and Maryland. Uh, Whatever. They're in. I don't really have big thoughts on either of them. I don't.
Maryland needs a road win. That's my only
Yeah.
comment there. At some point, they actually need to win a road game. They have the schedule to do it, but even one won't do it. They need to win a couple of road games.
Well, they're in non-conference play. Their quad four wins were like by an average of 42 points per game or something. They are this year's Iowa State. They beat the metrics for sure.
You know that I've actually heard that comparison from a fair amount of people that they're this year's Iowa State, but Iowa State went into Big 12 play and started kicking butt.
Yeah, correct.
Maryland hasn't done that, so like big
They're not
difference there.
The next tier where it gets all sorts of bubbly: UCLA, Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska, and I just moved Northwestern in there after their win over Michigan yesterday. Um, which of those five do you feel remotely good about? I don't think I could see all five of them missing, like the entire group collectively missing. I think probably UCLA has 3 quad 1A wins, but man, they've done nothing else and they just keep losing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are on the same page. UCLA is the one to pick out because they already banked him. And the reality is, on Selection Sunday, committee is going to say, they're not going to say, well, you won those in November. They're going to say,
Correct.
you got them. So I think UCLA having those is the difference maker because they're not just going to have to be outside of what you might think the tournament quality team's going to be. They're going to have to be kind of far outside of it because they already have these great wins.
Yeah. What we got here? USC, Indiana, Penn State. And I did add Rutgers now. Rutgers is interesting. God knows the spotlight will be on them if they're anywhere close. How much do you think Rutgers needs to do to make up for those losses to Kennesaw State and Princeton?
I think it's going to be too much for them to overcome,
I agree.
but they are definitely worth a look at this point, worth discussing. USC is the one that really gets my attention, though,
Okay.
because they look like maybe USC is actually pretty good. And their resume metrics are now in like kind of a decent range. They have a neutral court loss to St. Mary's, neutral court loss to New Mexico, but they now play 6 consecutive quad 1 games.
That'll do.
So if these past couple games are truly an indication of turning a corner, the opportunity's there. And same deal with UCLA, right? UCLA banked those great wins. If you see it, USC gets hot right now,
Yeah.
they could fade down the end of the season and still be in because they made their hay now. So opportunity for USC is coming up in this next month.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if Eric Musselman got USC into the tournament and John Calipari did not get Arkansas in? On to the SEC. 8 teams that are definitely in: Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Those are in no particular order. I honestly did them kind of by how much space the names would need and made them work. Any of those 8 that you think have any chance of missing the tournament? No pun intended if your pick is Ole Miss.
I like if I had to choose one, it's actually Mississippi State.
Okay.
I think all of those teams are in great shape. But the thing that Mississippi State doesn't have that the other teams have is like a win
Yeah.
that really grabs your attention. They don't have that yet. And being that's the SEC, you're going to have to beat one of these other teams. And they haven't done that yet. So I expect them to do that, but it will have to happen at some point.
All right. Next tier, certainly in for now, maybe not permanently. Missouri, Georgia, and Oklahoma. Which of those do you feel comfortable about? Which of those do you really not feel comfortable about? And why is it Oklahoma?
Yeah, I mean, I feel comfortable about Missouri and Georgia at
Yeah.
this point. I think Missouri's concern is going to be, yeah, they picked up the Florida win. Can they get another one? And the reason I say,
They beat Kansas, man.
but the reason I say that is because they beat Kansas at home. They played a horrible non-conference schedule. The only win Missouri has away from home, not even like a true road win, their only game outside of Columbia they've won is that game in Gainesville. They're gonna have
That's
to win another
that's a
game.
good only one to have,
Yeah,
though.
it is a really good only one, but you're gonna have to, like, I think you're gonna have to pick up a second win away from your home court at some point. Oklahoma, though, is the easy answer to me. Again, very similar to UCLA. Make some great wins to start the season, but I don't believe them at all. I knew that the losses were going to start piling up pretty quickly. I don't know that they're going to make the tournament. I don't feel really comfortable. I actually think they're going to miss the tournament.
Yeah, I kind of do too. I don't think they're that good. I mean, they had that great win against Michigan, but even that was kind of a miracle. Got that 4 point play from Jeremiah Fears. Um, yeah, so they were 13-0 in non-conference play, and now they're 0-4, correct? What do they need to be in SEC play? Like after going 13-0, could they get in at 6-12?
I think they could if they win their first SEC tournament game. I don't think they could do it losing their first SEC tournament game, but it would be close either way.
Yeah.
I think if you look at what their resume could potentially be this year compared to what it was last year, you might actually say this year's resume is even better than what it was last year when they really faded again and missed the tournament. But ultimately, it comes down to that determination of last year. I think Oklahoma was a pretty good team who played a brutal schedule. This year, I think they're just not that great of a team playing a
Playing brutal
brutal
schedule.
schedule. So that's where I think ultimately that's going to be the difference. And I do think they're going to miss, but barely, because they have to stay in the conversation with as much as they've already done.
Yeah. On the bubble, Texas and Vanderbilt, I actually moved both of them in after all the carnage that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday. Like they're probably my last team in and second to last in. Um, do you feel great about either of them? I certainly don't.
I don't feel great about Vandy. I have Texas and Vandy in the same spot as you do. I have Texas my second to last team in, Vandy's my third to last team in. And yeah, don't feel great about either of them, but I will say Texas in particular looks better.
Yeah.
And the fact that they have a tournament quality resume now, even if barely, I think they're going to make the field. I see them similarly to Texas Tech, but like a weakened version of Texas Tech, where, yeah, you know what? You don't look great so far. There's nothing that really stands out. But if you're in the conversation as is today, it's only going to get better from here, likely.
All right. And then LSU and Arkansas. And honestly, at this point, LSU is probably ahead of Arkansas. I mean, we got to talk Calipari. I mean, not that he's going to get fired after 1 year, but can they turn it around? I mean, they certainly have enough talent. Like, what the hell are they doing?
They don't look good. And let me ask you a question,
All
Kerry.
right. Oh, I have a trivia question for you after this, but go
All
ahead.
right. Well, here, so I'm excited for that one. Who do you think is the second best win for Arkansas this season?
Oh,
Is
I
it
just,
Miami or
yeah.
is it Lipscomb?
I was gonna
Because you could debate, is it Miami or Lipscomb?
say, I just wrote that down earlier because I have a like top teams in danger of missing the tournament or whatever. And I have like their three best wins and their three worst losses, and it's like, well, like, clearly the best win was Michigan, and I have no clue what the second best win is.
I mean, seriously, the fact that we're talking about Miami, who is objectively one of the worst teams in the ACC, being arguably the second best win for Arkansas,
Yeah,
that is a dreadful resume. Like everybody just kind of keeps talking about Arkansas because it's Arkansas. They've got talent. They've got a Hall of Fame coach. Not seeing it. I think they're gonna not even miss the tournament. I think they're not even gonna be close to making the tournament.
yeah. I think they're again comparing a team to Indiana. I think they're basically in the same boat. They don't get blown out like Indiana does, but just they have one really good win, and all that's left on that is like at least they don't have bad losses, right? That's the big thing with Indiana, with several teams on the bubble. All right, my trivia question for you is the excluding South Carolina, who's not in this conversation. The SEC has a grand total of 4 losses outside of quadrant one. Can you name them?
Oh my goodness.
2 of them are in league play.
Yeah, so
I should have asked you this before we started, give you some time to think.
yeah, definitely put me on the spot there. And I'm trying to think about who's lost to South Carolina as
It was
immediately
not
when it
South
comes to
Carolina.
okay, it's not
I'll
South
I'll give you
Carolina.
those 2. It was Oklahoma's home loss to Texas, which is
That makes
35th
sense.
in the net, and LSU's home loss to Vanderbilt, which is 42nd in the
Okay,
net.
I actually, to be honest, was going to name the LSU Vandy one. I was thinking about that one in my head, but I was trying to do some other math with South
All right.
Carolina.
The other 2 were in the early season tournaments on neutral floor.
All right, give me a second to think about this one. Oh, I think one of them might be Vandy.
Yep.
Um, and who was it? Vandy versus
Drake
Drake.
in
That's who
the
it was.
Charleston Classic
I
Championship.
I knew it was one of those, and I just couldn't think
Could
of
be
who
the
it was.
win that gets Drake into the tournament. We'll
It
see.
definitely could be.
And the other one is the team that you were a little question on over here. I'm seeing the gears turning. Who did Mississippi State lose
That's
to?
exactly what I'm thinking about. Who did they lose to? Can't think of it
All
off
right,
the top of my head.
Butler
Butler.
in
I knew
Tempe,
that one
Arizona.
because
Those are
the
the only.
Northwestern and Mississippi State wins back to back for Butler.
Those are the
Uh,
only non-quad one losses for the top 15 teams in the SEC. I forget who's South Carolina has a quad two and a quad four. I forget who their quad four was, but that's the reason they're nowhere near the conversation. But that's where we're at now. We'll be updating this periodically. And go
you gonna
Chiefs.
take a shot?
Go Chiefs. Oh shit.
I mean, come
Over the
on.
shoulder. Not even close. All right. We'll be back, I guess, on Thursday, unless you have another flight delayed. Take care.